Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Late Night Vision Show. We've got a great one for y'all tonight. If you've ever wanted to know what Jason and I spend way too much time talking about instead of doing the things that we should be doing, it's the topic we're going to be talking about here shortly. But before we do that, Mr. Jason Robertson, Outdoor Legacy Gear owner. How you doing, bud?
Man, I'm doing good. What do you know tonight, Hans?
So this topic we're talking about, I'm going to let you do the formal intro of this topic here in a little bit, but Mr. Jason Robertson, whenever I talk to him at night, is always on forums. He's on chat rooms, forums,
Chat
Facebook.
rooms.
Well,
You're showing your age.
It sounds like
You're showing
I know.
your
It's like I'm dialing. Yeah, I get on my chat rooms after I dial up on AOL.
Yeah.
But I am showing my age. So I know you do a lot of this. You get on the forums and the Facebook threads and different things like that to offer guidance to people and answer questions, and that's when you get all this work done. But you and I sit back, and if we're not talking about the show or hunting or a scope or something, it's about some of the stuff that we read on some of these Facebook forums and hunting forums,
and we go from hysterical laughter to crying in sadness at other times.
It is. Yeah, so it is. Some of this stuff is going to sound like nails on a chalkboard when you hear some of the things that's going to be read to you. But we've got a good show for you. Thank you for joining us. If you're tuning in on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, we appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in there. Please give us a big gold star or thumbs up, whatever you do over there. If you're on Facebook, please subscribe. This is a weekly show that we do, and that comes out every Thursday for the latest and greatest, newest, bestest stuff in night vision and thermal game. And we are back, and I'm going to tell you, this show right here. There's some funny stuff that goes on in the internet, but why don't you go ahead and tell us exactly what we're talking about.
So let me say this first. I'm going to say that Hans is exaggerating a little bit. I honestly.
No.
No, hang on. Hans is not on Facebook at all, which is the smartest man I know. And if I didn't have to be because of my business, I would not be. But I am. With that said, I don't post a lot. I don't comment a whole lot. There's a lot of reasons.
I know. I can't even get you to post the stuff.
No.
That you need to post about the show.
There's a lot of other things going on, but yeah, I do peruse, once or twice a day, a couple of the big thermal and hog hunting groups that are on Facebook. I don't spend a lot of time there. There is a couple message boards we've talked about before, Texas Hunting Forum, Texas Bow Hunter. I'm a sponsor over there, and I do look over there and try to post and help people when I can there. Normally at night when we're talking, I'm normally replying to a massive amount of emails that I get, and that's very time consuming. But I do lurk, I think, as it would be called. I lurk at a lot of these places and read. And one of the reasons that I really don't comment as much as I maybe should or could is because there's so much noise. And I just feel like it's just going to get drowned out. And so, all right, what this topic is if you've read the title of this show, it sums it up. And it's basically don't believe everything or don't believe maybe anything that you see on the internet. Okay. And I think that's probably a pretty good motto to live by. And that doesn't matter if we're talking about thermal scopes or, the coronavirus. It doesn't matter what the topic is. There's a lot of noise.
I will say this though. A lot of people will say that, and if you talk to anybody, they're like, I don't believe anything I read on the internet, but
that's where
that's
where we get all of our information.
Everybody, and when we're talking about the internet tonight, we're specifically talking about hunting forums, night vision thermal optics forums, Facebook forums. But that's where a lot of people, when they call us, or if Jason talks to them through email or whatever, they're going to, a lot of times they say, well, I got my information from answers, questions that I posted on such and such, right, and the answers that I got. So a lot of people say, oh, I never listened to anything on the internet, but a lot of people are getting a lot of their information on these scopes and optics from these internet groups, and it's
Right.
some of these things they get are pretty outrageous. But
Yeah, it is true. And so I want to lay this out, and I want to give a basic disclaimer first. So, this is pretty lighthearted, but it's also a serious topic because we're talking about the potential of you spending hundreds or thousands of dollars. And it's a big purchase. If you're spending $500, that's a lot of money. If you're spending 5,000 or 10,000, it's a lot of money. And you need to make that purchase with all the right information. And so what we're going to do here, again, while we're kind of joking about it, there is a very serious thread to this, and it is that you need to be very careful who you believe and where you get your information. Now, this is my disclaimer. This sounds very self-serving, and I know that I have to give this disclaimer a lot on this podcast is, okay, it sounds like I'm saying, only go buy from Outdoor Legacy. I want to start at the very front of this and say, no, while yes, we would love for you to come buy from Outdoor Legacy, there are a lot of other good full-time dealers in this industry. And Hans and I are friends with several of these guys. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we have, sat down and had drinks at the SHOT Show in Vegas.
A lot of the Texas dealers are pretty close to each other, and a lot of people might be surprised how often we do talk with other thermal dealers.
You would probably be very surprised. I mean, 2 days ago, yesterday, I had an hour-long conversation with one of my biggest competitors. We're good buddies. He was texting me about something crazy that he saw in a group. And that's actually how our conversation, we ended up calling. We talk a lot. So he's a good guy. If you called this guy, I guarantee you he'd take care of you. He uses these scopes. Again, there's several of these dealers that I'm friends with, that Hans is, that we know, and they're good guys, and we work together when we can. And so I don't want this to be all about just Outdoor Legacy, but what I will say is there's the majority of people that are dealers, and I hate to say this majority, but this is a kind of a weird industry. There's a lot of guys that are in this business that probably shouldn't be, and they're just selling some scopes on the side and whatever, and that's fine. I mean, it's America, but they don't know a lot about it, and that's a problem when it comes time to giving you advice. And so, and there's also, and again, I am by no means pointing fingers and naming names, but there's always going to be dishonest salesmen. Okay. And that is a concern. This is part of the disclaimer I know that people have. They go, well, look, if I call a dealer, he's just going to try to sell me the most expensive thing that he has in stock. And you're right. Some guys are going to do that. And if they are, you got the wrong dealer. You need to hang up and find another one. Okay. Because that is a problem as well. But what I will say is that when you're coming into this of what scope do I buy, or what monocular, or whatever it is, and you don't know where to start, you don't want to talk to 100 people that have used one scope each or two scopes each. You want to talk to one guy who's used 100 scopes. Mm-hmm. That guy, and yes, we're all biased and we all have our own opinions, but that guy has a lot of knowledge. And again, that's going to be hard for a lot of individuals to do.
Right.
The only reason that Hans and I can do it is because we're buying them. I mean, we're buying them. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of guys who've done a lot of hunting. They've hunted with a lot of different people. And so they have had the opportunity to look through a lot of different scopes. And that's good. And those guys can be very valuable and very helpful if they do this all the time. But again, the value in a full service dealer is that he's going to have looked through every single one of them extensively. So that's kind of what I want to give this disclaimer of. It's not all about just call Outdoor Legacy. It's just be careful where you get your information. So now I kind of want to get into some examples
we want to hear,
of things.
Yeah, so we do, Jason has gone through and found some examples of some threads, and we're not going to say where we found them or who they are, but some of the types of information that you'll hear from a question posed, and some of the responses is going to leave you shaking your head. But it's just examples of what you're going to find sometimes in some of the information that you're going to get that is it leads to more questions and confusion more than it does clearing anything up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so here's the thing. If you don't know the answer to the question and you get 40 different answers,
Yeah.
how do you know which one of those is right? And
Right.
and so if what happens, and I find this, and I'm going to talk about this first here, is Hans and I see this talking to guys on the phone. They have latched on to tidbits of information. Sometimes that information is accurate and good. Many times it's not. And now, even there might have only been one guy say it, but they saw it, it stuck with them, and now it's written in stone. And so I've got to find some way to nicely go, that ain't right. and I'm trying to be nice about it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give some examples of things that have just come up. And by the way, if I really had saved some of these things over the last year or two, I'd have some doozies. But I kind of came up with some I've just seen in the last few weeks. But
And these are things that Jason and I talk about each night. He'll say, "You never believe what I
You'll
read."
never believe this. I know. But now these aren't the you'll never believes, but these are things that I have had recently in phone conversations or emails or private messages or whatever things people have sent me. So one guy was looking for a particular scope, and he said in his email, I'm not going to name. I'm going to try to be as vague as I can on some of this. He said, "Are you
They're
going to be
probably listening to the show
I'm sure
right
they
now.
are. That's probably not good, but no. I'm not making fun of these guys. This is just an example. The guy said,
Yeah.
"Are you going to be getting any more of these scopes? I read on Facebook they're discontinued." Well, my reply was, "Yes, we're going to be getting some very soon because they're not on the market yet." And he replies back, "No, I saw they're already discontinued." Well, they're not on the market yet. I mean, and so again, I'm trying to be nice, but he's got this totally backwards information, and I've got to try to find a way to work through that. I had a guy who called me this week and had a very large budget looking to get a thermal scope and a thermal handheld, and he said, told me what he was going to do, and the whole time I'm processing, thinking of, okay, here's some options. This would fit him magnification wise, price wise, all this. And then he names this certain scope model, and he says, but I don't want that because of all the point of impact shift problems they have. And what he named was a scope that I've never in all my years heard of having a single point of impact shift problem. I'm not going to say there couldn't have been one random scope somewhere. This was the most bizarre thing I ever heard. And so I said, "Hey, think you might be confused. I've never heard of that model having a POI shift. Maybe it was something else that you read that about." And he goes, "Nope, I read it." He said, "I won't own one of them." Well, the problem is that this scope is the scope that he needs. It fits everything that he wants, price, bells, whistles, magnet. It's the scope he needs, but he's done. And and I'm not going to wear the guy out because he's like drawing a line in the sand. He goes, "I read it. It's a major problem." Well, I'm not denying that somebody said it, but there couldn't have been more than one or two people say it. And I'm like, where did they come up with it? And so another example is there's another, scope that's been out for not a super long time, but fairly new. It's new for 2020. It's been super. Image quality is great. Everybody's loving this scope. And this guy emails me and says that, I read on the internet that on this forum, and this thing has got all these problems. It should have never been released. They ought to be recalled. and, it just goes off. Well, this guy's never looked through a thermal scope in his life. And we've been talking, we've been emailing, we've been going back and forth. And he starts telling me about this scope, and he's just belligerent about the fact. And I mean, it's fine. If you don't want the scope, don't buy it. I wasn't even on my list of things to talk to him about, but he is convinced. And so I told the guy, I said, listen, I don't know who said it. I'm sorry. Maybe one guy had a problem, but we've seen a lot of these. We're using this scope. We've seen a lot of these pass through our hands, this particular scope. And I know a lot of other dealers that have had a lot pass through their hands. This problem you're talking about might have happened on a scope, but it's not happening on every scope. It's not, I've never heard of it happening. And so my thought is, and I'm going to say this on, kind of this summary of all these, is either one, the guy's just flat out lying to you. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you're hearing these things, the guy's lying to you. The guy is for some reason misleading or lying to you. He's got an ulterior motive, or he's just ignorant of it. And when I say ignorant, I don't mean that in any hateful way. I mean, he doesn't have the knowledge of it. And so a lot of times these things happen. Maybe the guy is trying to sell another brand of scope. Maybe the guy is pro staff, or his, brother-in-law works for this other company. Or maybe he really just doesn't know. And so you've got to be very careful what you latch onto from what you've heard. Now, I will be the first to say that if you read something 150 times, there may be some truth in it. You need to investigate that. That may very well be true, good or bad. And this goes both ways. Hey, this is the greatest scope ever made. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. So I think you need to look into that. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pull up here a couple different things that I did save. So a guy asked a very, very good question. It's a very common question. Mm-hmm. And that question was, let me get a drink here.
Yeah, it's just
yeah, this is. You know what this is
my favorite one? Okay, here we go.
All right. So, and this was no one who replied to this. If anybody, and I'm going to try to be vague, but if you recognize yourself here, the people replying mostly knew what they were talking about, and they were trying to be helpful, but they weren't replying in a way that was helpful.
Right.
So you got to remember, this guy doesn't know anything about it. He says, does an IR light, so if you don't know, let me explain IR light real quick. If you use a digital night vision scope like the Sightmark Wraith or the Pulsar DigX or any of these scopes, they have what looks like a flashlight on the side of them. I mean, it looks like that. You turn it on, and it is an infrared light. Infrared light is something that that we cannot see. Human eyes, hogs, coyotes, animals do not see on that infrared spectrum of light. But the scope does see. It's got an IR filter in it, so it can see it. So it looks just like a light to that scope. Now, when you turn one of these lights on, and so just pretend that you got a flashlight, when you turn it on and you look into it, there is a square LED and it glows red. Okay, so if you look into it, which I wouldn't necessarily advise,
point it towards your face.
There's a red glow. You got a lens and it's glowing red. It is casting no visible light that you and I can see out, but it is red. So even if you walk out there, 30, 40, 50 yards, depending on the light, maybe 100, and you look into it, you would see this little bitty soft red glow. Mm-hmm. But it does not cast any light. There's just, again, this glow where that LED is lit up.
Yeah, so basically, if you point it towards your face, you're going to see a red glow. But if you take that flashlight and point it out away from your body at a tree, you're not going to see those trees lit up from a beam of light.
There's no visible light. That's right. You can go in a dark room, flip this thing on, and it's just as dark as it was before, unless you got a night vision scope. All right. Yeah. So this guy says, he asked this question. And he says, does IR light put out light that you can actually see, like the green night lights? Or is this something totally different? I'm looking at my options and wondering. Logical question. We get it all the time. Very,
So yeah,
very common.
what he's talking about are the green spotting flashlights that basically people hunt with, and they strap them on the end of their rifle that cast a green beam. So he's wanting to know if it's like that.
It's just like that. Is it putting out? Exactly. Now I lost my place. Here it is. So the first person replies and says, it puts off a visible red light from the source.
Correct. It is.
But it's confusing.
It's not. It's confusing, but technically accurate. But it is a confusing answer.
It's not the right answer. It's right, but it's not right. So you know. So then the next guy says, "No, not really. It's barely visible." Then the guy goes, "Well, it depends on the IR light. It's faint, but it's there." Well, see, they're still talking about looking into the head of it.
Well,
and
so
they're right.
They assume that this guy knows that it's not like a real flashlight.
Exactly.
They think that he knows what an IR light is, but this guy has no clue.
No, and he's already said that. Does it put off visible light that you can actually see? Yeah. So
if you read those first three responses, and I'm putting myself in the questioner's shoes, I'm thinking, okay, it is kind of like a flashlight, but like a lower, a lower power flashlight, but it's something you could, point out there and still see.
That's what I
by
would
those
think.
three answers. So those guys in their mind, they're right, and they technically are right. They're missing the point.
They're not explaining it. Yeah, exactly, correctly. So then, other guy comes on and he says you can only see IR with a night vision optic. Okay, that's the best answer so far.
Yeah.
Then another guy comes on with a picture of his IR light, looking straight at the head of it, looking at the LED where it's glowing. Yeah. And now remember, this is a picture. So you're looking at it and it looks like it's a light on. And he says, "What?" Okay. So then another guy comes and he posts like some kind of Wikipedia article that explains that, it's a little confusing. It basically says you can't see it. Another guy says IR is not part of the visible light spectrum. That's correct. Then this other guy replies, who posted the light, and says, "Go turn it on. Walk about 50 yards and look back. You'll get your answer." Well, again,
he doesn't have an IR light. He's asking a question.
Yeah, number one, he doesn't have one. Number two, you're still talking about two different things. Okay,
right.
So then this guy says you can only see it if you put your eye up to it. I don't even know. Don't do that with anything.
Yeah.
And then this guy says it's visible from the source. You're not going to see it on an animal 5 yards away. Well, that makes me think that it's still putting out something, some kind of light. Can I see it at 4 yards away? And he gives a pretty long answer. And again, he means well. So then this is what the original guy, let me see, there's a couple new replies.
You're reading through this, but this is how these conversations, it's like a race to the bottom, because
it's a race to the bottom.
A good question was posted on a group by a person that doesn't know. And again, people are going to forums and Facebooks to learn more about it. They pose in the industry, a very basic question that a lot of people can answer. And then it's the people that respond, it is a race to see who can be right and who can prove that they're right, and pretty much shame everybody else.
There starts to be a lot of like forks in the road, and a lot of infighting.
Yeah, exactly, and that's how a lot of these conversations go.
So this is the way that it ends. There's a couple other comments, and a couple of them are good. A couple have actually been since I saved this, but the original person who asked this question says, "Thanks." So basically, much less light than a normal green or red hunting light. So he believes he's going to see light because he goes, "Yeah." And the reply to that is, "Yeah, much less." Less, none. How about none? Unless you let.
Yeah.
I mean, it just needs a better explanation. And there was a couple guys, and again, to their defense, that did answer, but those answers got drowned out. He didn't. Yeah. The correct answer he was given in there. Yeah. But there was one guy, And that guy looks like an idiot among all the other guys who say, yeah, you can see it a little bit. So very,
Yeah, it's
very confusing.
so so the guy's left thinking it still kind of works like a flashlight when it's
Exactly.
not anything like a flashlight. But you're right. There are some correct answers in there, but I think when you first read me this thread and you were saying, man, this is
There was
some
no
of the stuff
correct answers at the time.
yeah, we have to
There
like
was-
weed through.
Yeah.
But what my response to you was, it sounds like everybody's trying to sound like an engineer or trying to be the smartest guy in the room, because some of those answers are correct, but it could have been explained in a better, easier way to be understood. And I'm
I know.
East
know.
Texas redneck. The way I
Ex-
explain things is
Yeah,
dumb it down to the
I
lowest
need
common
it
denominator.
explained like I'm a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
That's the way that I need it. And I know some guys call me and they think, good gravy, this guy is going to talk for an hour and he's explaining stuff like, but again, I want to make sure people understand the concept. And if I talk to a guy and I figure out that he may know more about it than I do, great. I try not to talk to him that way.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that, because it is confusing.
Right.
And me, Hans, all of us, whatever a topic is, we can make assumptions because we know about it. And we're talking to somebody, we're not explaining it good. Hey, let's be honest. There's a lot of people who are really good at certain things, but it doesn't make them a good teacher. And so I think that's kind of what we're getting into when we see a lot of these. There's a lot of bad info, and there's some of these threads. I don't have time to go through them all. One thing here that I saw, and this just gives you an example. It's kind of going back to being more broad about when you ask about a certain scope, or you ask her, what should I buy? Those questions they're useless on the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, and these are on here over and over and over and over every day, and it's what's the best XYZ insert, what's the best thermal for coyote hunting, what's the best night vision scope for hog hunting in Texas. You need so much more information than that. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when people call me, they get tired, I know they do, of me going, all right, how far are you shooting? What's your terrain like? And I ask all these questions, and I can sense sometimes guys are like, man, get to the meat. I want to know what to buy. I'm like, I can't tell you what to buy. There's so much that we've got to know before we get to that point, because there's a lot of different options. And so anyway, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there was some discussion about a guy had bought a high resolution 640 scope. He knew nothing about it, and he could not understand. He was super disappointed. This was a $5,000 scope. Super disappointed that when he zoomed in all the way, that the image quality was terrible.
Yeah.
Well, he obviously didn't talk to a dealer who explained the digital zoom and what that does to your resolution. And so this guy comes on here and he says, yeah, that's why I don't see the point in buying these 640 scopes. They're useless, blah, blah, blah. And he goes on explaining why he doesn't think anybody should buy one. Well, he gets into this mini argument here. This is one of these side trails. This other guy replies, and this guy's giving correct information, and they're going back and forth. Well, remember, all his point is, the original guy just didn't understand that every time that he zooms, he doubles his base magnification, he cuts his resolution in half. And again, you may be going, I don't know what you're talking about. That's something I explain to people on the phone if they don't know. And so he doesn't understand this. And so finally, at the end of this, they've got like 5-6 replies each between them. The original guy who starts saying he doesn't see the reason in buying a 640 scope, he says in this big reply, well, I've never actually looked through one. Whoa, hallelujah. Merry Christmas.
Well, you're right. And a lot of people don't. And if you're listening right now, a thermal scope, any thermal scope by any brand manufacturer, doesn't matter, digital zoom. Anytime you magnify the image, it cuts your resolution in half. So if you have a 640 scope and you magnify the image, if you go one step up.
Say it's a 2-power scope and you go to 4-power.
4-power, it'll take it from 640 resolution to 320.
And you go from 4 to 8. Yeah.
Yep.
You're going to do it
And
again.
it cuts in half again. And that's the same for all scopes. But the way the person that answered the original, topic thread or whatever, made it seem like that it only happened to 640 resolution scopes.
Correct.
Because he said that's
Yeah.
why I don't buy 640 resolution. And and it was funny when you were reading that. Turned out the guys never even looked through a 640 resolution scope. But something when the original poster bought that scope, if he would have talked to somebody or known that was exactly what's going to happen. Now, there are some circumstances that Jason and I talk about a lot where a higher resolution scope maybe at a higher magnification scope at a lower resolution may be more beneficial for you than a lower power scope with higher resolution. And we've talked about that in the past. We've talked about it with a lot of people on the phone, on the show. But it's a series, of questions and things that we have to find out to get to that point.
That's exactly right. Nobody can tell you that without asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so you brought up kind of what my next point is. And we're talking about, specifics here of scopes and things. And I've got 100 examples of this. It's just every single question posed on a forum on, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or wherever. So I'm not even going to read them. But
I love the ones that are like, I think you're going to get into it, but the ones that say, what scopes should I get? And they get anything or monocular. What monocular should I get? And they get anything from the lowest monocular you can find on the market all the way up to the most expensive rifle scopes.
Perfect example. I've got that. No. I have it saved right here.
Okay,
the guy asked, he said, I've got a $2,500 budget for a thermal monocular. What should I get? Well, when you ask one of those questions, while you and I think
Pandora's box.
Yes. While you and I think it's wise to put your budget,
absolutely,
you might as well not, because it doesn't. That nobody reads that. They just see.
Well,
the internet is asking me for my opinion, and so this guy.
What I don't, and I hate to break in, but I hate to see, because the budget is a very important factor, one of the most important factors, obviously.
It is.
But you will get, if you put your budget out there on the internet, and it's not 10 grand, you're going to be shamed, because people are going to say, buy
once, cry once.
Yeah, buy an $8,000 scope or go home. Don't buy anything. And that's just the worst. Wrong.
That's
answer
exactly
you could ever
how
think
this
of.
went. This one particular that I've just got pulled up here. It started off with, it just name thermal monoculars. And just that's all you're doing. You're just naming one and putting it out there. So this guy gets 40 replies with 28 different monoculars. 3 guys have named scopes, and it ends with the guy saying, if you're not going to buy a Trigicon, blah, 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 the Mark III 60 millimeter, which is a $9,000 thermal scope.
And the guy said
it's a $2,500 budget. Another guy comes on. I read this one yesterday. A guy says that he needs a thermal monocular, and he needs it for some security purposes, and it can't be weapons mounted. And it was some different things that he was doing. He kind of went into a little bit of that. And his first answer was just a simple one word, and it was the name of a $2,500 weapons mountable scope. And he exactly said he couldn't have
we're being vague.
Yeah.
And we're being vague, but if you knew what this guy did, you would know why it cannot be weapons mountable.
Right.
And we can't get into that.
Can't get into all this. So then the next reply is another thermal scope with a laser rangefinder.
That sounds awesome.
This is ridiculous. And so, and it is unbelievable. And again, remember, he said he had a $3,500 budget. And this thing just derails. And basically a guy comes on there and says the 50 millimeter Envision Atlas, that's nearly $6,000.
$6,000.
Well, that's not, it's totally unhelpful. And again, there may be times that you call me, or you talk to Hans, or you talk to another one of these dealers, and you say, all right, here's what I need. These are my criteria, and I got a $3,500 budget. And we might say, okay, here's the thing. We can't get you X, Y, and Z for $3,500.
Right.
What you're asking for is $5,500. Now, we can get you this for 35 and you're not going to get Z, but sometimes that has to happen. So I'm not saying there's never a time to say, or even say, hey, you're right here. You want to spend 3,800 and, for 41, you can get this and you ought to consider, so there's times for that, but people aren't doing that. They're randomly throwing out names, and it is, and you don't know what to do with it. What do you do with all this data? It's not data. It's just noise.
Yeah, it is. I used to frequent back a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I used to get on a couple forums quite often, and I'd post in there and I'd, answer questions and different things. I had to stop because not just the noise, not just the bad information, but a lot of negativity that you would see being cast on people coming in that are new to it, just that are asking basic questions.
Exactly.
And, I read something today that said the internet, has changed the way that people act towards each other because they know that there's no threat that person's not going to get punched in the face.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody would act that way in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Not many people.
You can be disrespectful on the internet because you're not going to get punched in the face. But yeah, so I'm going to give an example that's not related to the internet. If I can jump in here and give,
I know what this one is because I remember you telling me about this.
I was at a store. I'm not going to say where at all. But I was at a store, and it's a store that sells a lot of different things, a lot of different hunting stuff, sells, anything from guns to gun parts to all types of hunting stuff. And they do sell thermal and night vision optics. And so, which means that they have probably somebody dedicated to, that department, selling that type of stuff.
Think so?
I would think so. I would think they would have one or two guys that they say, "Hey, I feel more comfortable with you talking to customers
but they're
about
not.
this stuff."
You're not saying that's all they do all day.
No,
I was going to say they can't sell that much. Okay.
No.
Yeah, I was going to say
they probably have a guy that works there. But if somebody has a thermal question, they'll say, "Hey, Joe Bob knows more about it than anybody."
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was looking over at the widgets and the doodads on aisle 6. I don't remember. When I go somewhere, it is like up and down every aisle looking at everything that I don't need. But so the Zibley zoos that I was looking at, which had my 100% immediate attention, was kind of thrown to the curb whenever I heard a response. A customer had come in, was looking at a thermal scope and a rifle combo, basically selling as a package deal. And the gentleman worked there, sounded very knowledgeable, was very confident. I mean, knew he knew what he was talking about. He was talking about a lot of different things until he started talking about the Pulsar Core RX Q30V, which a great scope. Jason and I both love it. We've sold a ton of them, and we suggest it to a lot of people. It's a $1,900 entry-level thermal scope, no bells and whistles, very low magnification, compared to some of the other pulsar scopes out there.
Focus and
This gentleman, who like I said, who's probably a great guy, with a straight face and confidence in his voice, told this customer that without a doubt he could absolutely kill a hog at 400 yards with a Pulsar Core RX Q30V. And I almost choked on my tongue. It was so hard. I was like,
hang
no.
on. I'm going to butt in here because some people don't know. That scope, Hans and I would say that normal conditions, you could identify a hog confidently between 150 and 200 yards.
I'll just say this. I'm not out there running around telling people, hey, go shoot a hog at 400 yards with a Trijicon.
I wouldn't tell them that with Envision, Trijicon, no. I don't care what it is. I wouldn't tell, no way.
400 yards.
That's a long time. I mean, that's a long ways in the daytime. I mean,
but especially with an RX Q30V $1,900 thermal scope, great scope, not a 400-yard scope.
Not a 400 yard. I don't know many 400 yard.
There's
scopes
not
for thermals,
any 400-yard scopes that I know of that we would say without a doubt you can kill a hog at 400 yards.
Wow.
But with that being said, that customer, I didn't stick around. It took everything in me not to. It's his job. It's his place.
Sure.
He works there. It's not my business. I didn't say anything, but man, I looked over at the customer, with the biggest puppy dog concerned look on my face, just trying to get his attention to say, "Don't do it.
Don't believe that." Yeah.
No, yeah. It's a great scope. You'd like it, but stick to hogs at about 100 yards, 150 yards with
Exactly.
it. But yeah, so the misinformation comes from all sectors of the communication platforms that you can find, and there is a lot of misinformation. I'll let Jason wrap a bow on this because he's got some good notes.
Here's what I want to say. I want to say a couple things to finish, but I want to be clear about something. Again, I made all those disclaimers early on. I know you may be sitting here thinking these two guys are arrogant. They just think that everybody ought to know as much as they do. No, it's not that. It's that this is true of everybody that's listening to this. You have a trade or you have a hobby. You have something that you know all about that I know nothing about. Okay. And so if you heard me trying to explain to somebody about your trade or your whatever it is that you're an expert in that I know nothing about, you would be shaking your head. No different than, I'll give an example. Right now, we're still in 2020 with the coronavirus and all this jazz going on. The whole world on social media, Hans and I included now, everybody are medical experts. we can quote stats and we can quote studies and we can talk about what we don't know nothing, but everybody's got an opinion, and that's fine. That's America. But if a doctor, heard some of the things that Hans or I might say, or that they're, whatever.
I'm going to tell you, I've said a lot in the last 3 months that
you were unqualified for.
Very unqualified, and have turned out very factually incorrect.
So you get my
other
point.
than the fact of Jason and I do think that we've already had the coronavirus. We'll maybe talk about that.
That's exactly. That's another story.
We do think we've already had it.
But yes. So what I'm trying to be clear about is that we're not just trying to be jerks. We're not trying to say we know more than anybody else. There are, again, a lot of guys that know way more than us. Okay. But I'm going to put the bow on it and say this. It's kind of where we started. I'm not making fun of anybody who doesn't know or anything like that. When you get ready, I think, now I'm going to say this. What I do think that Facebook and the groups and the forums, the message boards and all this stuff, what I think they're really good for, they're chat rooms, AOL chat rooms. I think they're really good for going out there and posting a picture of the hog you killed and saying, man, I got this hunting story,
that's why Instagram is so great. That's why I'm on Instagram and not Facebook.
Right. Yeah, it is. Hey, here's a picture of me and my kid, and my daughter killed this deer. And what I think that is where there's a lot of value, there's enjoyment, and people can get things out of it. And again, I'm not saying that good information and ideas can't be exchanged in this medium. But what I am saying is, if you're going somewhere to get this information you know nothing about, and you know nothing about the people giving it to you. And so you need to be very wary. You need to choose your sources wisely. And, maybe don't just choose one source. That's fine. We're not saying we're the end all. You can go on YouTube. There's a lot of good videos. There's a lot of good review videos. But what I would say is this. If I took the top 4 thermal and night vision dealers in Texas, and with us being one of those, I know the other 3 very well. And if we all sat down in a room and we laid out 20 thermal rifle scopes. And we said, all right, you put them in line from the best to the worst just based on image quality. Just that. And you put that line of 20 scopes up there. I can guarantee you, and we each 4 did that, they would be extremely similar in that lineup. Mm-hmm. I mean, there might be, well, wait a minute, what about this? But we would have those things laid out. If we just took that one criteria, image quality, they would be extremely similar. You go ask that question on the internet, and you're going to get the one at the bottom. Some guy's going to put it on this end. And the one on this end is somebody's going to put it down there. And so I don't know how you filter that. You need to find somebody that has seen all the scopes that you can trust, that can give you good information. And then I tell people this all the time. I talked to a guy at 5 o'clock on Friday about a scope, and he was about ready to buy it. He didn't know anything about it until we had talked. And I said, hey, don't buy it right now. You came into this green 45 minutes ago. Go do your research this weekend. Go look on YouTube. Go see what you can find about this scope. We've honed you down, so we know this is where kind of need to be. I've explained why. Now go do your research on this scope. Don't take just my word for it. Go look at other people's reviews. Go find some footage of it. Hey, Hans has got a review with footage from the field. Go watch that. See what it looks like. Look at the walk around of the scope. Call me on Monday and let's talk. And so, you need to make your own mind up, and you can do a lot of research on your own, but a lot of times it helps when you've at least been guided in the right direction. Yep. And so that is, to put a bow on it, as Hans says, that's kind of the summary of this. And we have laughed about this. Hans and I laugh every day. Like, I'm reading him this stuff. Can you believe this guy says this terrible information and people believe it? But so be wary of what you read out there.
Yeah. Don't let the internet be your only source of information, but we are on the internet as well. And
we're on the internet that you wouldn't know about us without the internet. So we're guilty as charged. Be wary.
You can definitely fact check us and do the same thing and check all your other resources, but definitely make sure that you follow through and talk to some credible people. There's a lot of them out there. But thank y'all for joining us this week. If you're looking to find anything related to night vision or thermal optics, you can always call Jason over at Outdoor Legacy Gear, 877-350-1818. You can find all his information, a list of the scopes, specs, prices on outdoorlegacygear.com. You can find Jason hanging out in his chat room over on Facebook. Facebook.
Don't send me messages on Facebook if you can help it. I just call me, email me.
There you go. Call him. But you can find him on Facebook. You can find him on Instagram sometimes. You can find him on YouTube sometimes. But he is here. He is here every week with us on the Late Night Vision Show podcast. You can find me over on YouTube at Hans ETX. That's Hans ETX. Put out videos quite regularly, review videos and hunting videos. Also on Instagram, Hans ETX. And thank y'all for watching again this week. We'll be back next Thursday with another episode.
That's right, folks. Yeah, you can find the Late Night Vision Show. You've already found us. Like, subscribe, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's the podcast audio only version or whether you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, and never miss an episode. Like Hans said, every Thursday we've got a new show coming. We do a lot of reviews. We do random topics about things like this. Something just gets under our skin or something we find funny, or maybe it's just hunting stories or tactics or things that work for us. So you never know what you're going to get, but it's always guaranteed to be worth exactly what it cost you. So that is that's our guarantee to you. Sometimes it's worth more than others, but anyway, we do appreciate you. You can find all of our past episodes. You can go to thelatenightvision.show.com. You can learn more about the show, about us, and again, see all the past episodes. So between now and next Thursday, stay safe in the fields and keep making those bacon pancakes.